Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. Surya Vangsha Jayate. Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam Shri Vishnu Shri Vishnu Shri Vishnu. Namaste everyone, and welcome to our latest live stream satsanga. This is brought to you by the International Sanatana Dharma Society, and you can find more information about our movement and our many projects and activities at dharmacentral.com. If you have not yet done so, please feel free to subscribe to this channel, as well as the other channels that we have on Alt Tech. We have a BitChute channel, we have an Odyssey channel, we have a Rumble channel. And to find those, please simply look at the description of this video, and you'll see the links to all of those, as well as our Telegram channel, our Gab account, and on and on and on. Facebook, Twitter, we are everywhere. So with that, again, I thank you for being here. And what we're going to do now is we're actually going to dive right directly into the talk for today. And this is going to be a very nice talk, actually. And the talk itself is entitled Knowing the Eternal. And what we're going to be doing is looking at a very specific verse from the Mundaka Upanishad. And this is a very beautiful verse. It's a somewhat well-known verse as far as the Mundaka Upanishad goes, and it is a verse that I like quite a bit. I've read and contemplated this verse many, many times. It's one that I like very specifically because it's a very nice encapsulation of what are the essential teachings of Sanatana Dharma. And of course, it can't go into everything, but again, it's a very nice summary, a very nice encapsulation, as you'll see. So with that, let's dive into this verse, and this is Mundaka Upanishad 1, 2, verse 12. Very good. And this is how it proceeds. Let a man devoted to spiritual life examine carefully the ephemeral nature of such enjoyment, whether here or hereafter, as may be won by good works, and so realize that it is not by good works that one gains the eternal. Let him give no thought to transient things, but, absorbed in meditation, let him renounce the world. If he would know the eternal, let him humbly approach a guru, devoted to Brahman and well-versed in the scriptures. So very, very nice verse, very beautiful verse from Mundaka Upanishad. And if you wanted to follow along either either now or as we go through this verse. Again, please look at the description of this video, and you'll see this verse there, and you can feel free to follow along as we go through this verse. So again, let us indeed do that. Let's look through this verse. And let me just say, first of all, one thing that's very nice about this verse is that it is explaining the nature of the spiritual path, why one commences the spiritual path, what it is like to be on the spiritual path, what is the goal of the spiritual path, what one does when one is on the spiritual path. So again, it's interesting. So many people use such terminology, the spiritual path, and again, you find such terminology in both legitimate spirituality, and if you've been to my talks in the past, you know that there is indeed legitimate and illegitimate forms of spirituality. But when it comes to legitimate forms, indeed, you find this idea of spirituality being a path. You also find many, many other individuals who talk about this idea of there being a path, whether it's New Age individuals or, again, people of every description humanly imaginable who consider themselves to be spiritual. So this is something that we find that's universal. But one thing that is nice is that, as is the case for every other spiritual question and phenomenon in existence, nothing is left to speculation when it comes to the spiritual path. So here too, what we will see is that indeed it explains very specifically, very succinctly, very authoritatively, very conclusively, what does it mean to be on a spiritual path? What does one do? But before we go there, first, again, let's go through this verse a little bit. Let's start from the beginning. Let a man devoted to spiritual life, stop there. As you know, I will often do this where rather than looking even at an entire clause, what to speak of an entire sentence or an entire verse, sometimes just a few words. So first of all, let a man who is devoted to spiritual life. We need to begin there because, again, even with those very few words, what is being described is something that is crucially important to understand. And that is that, as I often say, this verse does not apply to just anyone. It doesn't apply to the typical individual who has a passing fancy with spirituality, who sees it as a passing fad, etc., etc. So many different scenarios that I can give, but rather this is talking about a very specific individual. That is, an individual who not only wants to have a spiritual life and thus be on a spiritual path, but who is devoted to that path. So again, who is this verse talking about? It's talking about an individual who is serious. It's talking about an individual who is sincere, an individual who truly wants to know truth and is willing to do what is necessary to know that truth, and thus who is willing to indeed traverse a path which may end up being long. And so thus the foundation of his very search itself is that he must be devoted to spiritual life. So again, it can't be something where, it's just a fad. I saw Deepak Chopra on Oprah the other day, so I thought maybe I would look into this spiritual thing for a little while. No, this is for someone who is devoted to knowing truth, someone who truly, truly wants to know, why am I here? What is the meaning of life, etc. So it's important to understand everything that comes after now in this verse is speaking about that individual. This is the question. Are you that individual? Are you that person? See, this is just as an aside, but it's always interesting to me when people will begin the spiritual path, or sometimes not even begin. Sometimes atheists will, of course, challenge everything. The existence of God, why am I suffering, etc., etc. And the question for them being, are you someone who is truly devoted to the spiritual path? Or are you someone for whom, again, spirituality was just a quick fad for you, and because you didn't devote yourself to it, you, of course, didn't find what you were looking for, so therefore you want to blame the spiritual path rather than your own insincerity. A bad workman quarrels with his tools. This is something my guru would say, and he didn't invent that statement. It was something that he quoted himself, but it's a beautiful statement, that a bad workman quarrels with his tools. In other words, rather than looking to himself and questioning his own skill, he'll blame his tools. He'll say, oh, the hammer was just off somehow, or this tool didn't work, etc. Well, in the same way, in order to truly be successful on the spiritual path, we need to, again, as this verse says, be devoted to it. Not just kind of play with it and hope for the best, and we don't get a result very quickly, so we give up. No, we must be devoted. And if we're not devoted, then when it seems that we don't necessarily make a lot of quick progress, we can't blame the path. We have to look at ourselves. But let's go a little bit deeper into this. Let a man devoted to spiritual life examine carefully the ephemeral nature of such enjoyment. And let's stop there, because in a moment it will be described what sort of enjoyment is being spoken of. And of course, material enjoyment, the enjoyment of material things in this world. But the spiritual person must examine carefully the ephemeral nature of material enjoyment. In other words, this is the very, really beginning of spiritual life. This really is the beginning. This is something that is meant for an individual who especially is just starting spiritual life. That is, that they look at the material world around them, that they look at this world with all of its duality, with all of its pain and suffering and fleeting enjoyments, etc., etc. And in such an objective, very real sort of examination of where they find themselves, the spiritual person begins to understand that all of the enjoyments of this world, while they may be nice, some may be actually very tamasic, that is very vulgar, some may be very rajasic, just very passionate. Some enjoyments may even be quite sattvic. Regardless of what sort of enjoyments we have within this material world, unless God is in the center of our lives, as we are having those enjoyments, they are ephemeral. They are truly without meaning. And how can we say that? Because they're fleeting. They're gone after a little while. You know, you wanted to have a banana split, a delicious, wonderful banana split with hot fudge and all the toppings and everything that you would love to have, and there it is before you, and you eat it. Now, as you're eating it, are you enjoying it? Absolutely you are. And is it a horrible enjoyment? Is it something sinful, terrible, horrible? No, it doesn't have to be. It could actually be a nice, happy enjoyment that you'll have. But this is the link between all enjoyments and, for that matter, all sufferings, all experiences that are materially based. They are transient. You see, you had that banana split. I remember having banana splits once in a while when I was very young in New York, in Brooklyn, different places. You have that banana split, but then it's over. And where is it now? See, I may have had a banana split, I don't know, when I was 10 years old. Well, where is it now? All these decades later. It's ephemeral. That is the nature of material enjoyments. So now let's go on. Let a man devoted to spiritual life examine carefully the ephemeral nature of such enjoyment, whether here or hereafter. So very interesting. This one clause that is here is actually a very important clause. Because what this little clause is explaining is that what is being spoken of here is the ephemeral nature of all material experience, whether in the present, that is, whether with what we are doing quite literally right now or today or tomorrow or in the immediate future, or even in our future lifetime. Because, of course, this is the nature of future lifetimes. In other words, when we pass away and then we are born again via reincarnation, the nature of such enjoyments is that, again, whether it's now or in the future, it's still temporary. And we are always chasing, if we are in illusion, we are always chasing the temporary. And that's the tragedy. That is the true tragedy of being in illusion and being a materialist, an individual for whom all that exists for us are the pleasures of this world, are the acquirements of this world, are the possessions of this world, etc. When you are such an individual, you are always chasing shadows. And again, whether it's here or whether it's in the lifetime to come. As far as the lifetime to come, it can even be at the point in which we can actually become a very powerful being, let's say via good karma. So as we know, through reincarnation, we can either be born as a human again or as an animal. We can be born in a very lowly sort of life as a subhuman or a demonic being, or we can be born as what is called a god. In any case, all of these lifetimes, all of these lives are temporary. Even if we're born as a god and we live for 10,000, 100,000, a million, or millions of years. The truth of the matter is, the reason why this is mentioned, either here or hereafter, is because even if we were to indeed have such good karma that we were to be born as a god, the pleasures of that life are just as temporary as they are now. And this is what's important to keep in mind. Therefore, our goal is not merely to become a god. Indeed, to become a god is the goal of someone who, spiritually speaking, is infantile in their mentality, not understanding that within the context of eternity, whether you live for 100 years or 1,000,000 years, it's still the blink of an eye within the context of eternality. And only a mature individual realizes that. Now let's go on. So the ephemeral nature of such enjoyment, as may be won by good works, i.e. good karma, by doing good in this world, by all sorts of good works, really. This can be interpreted as any sort of good work. So good work that you do to, again, have a very rich material life in this world, or doing even good karma. This clause can be interpreted in this way as well. So again, even the enjoyments, the material pleasures that we can have as a result of doing good karma, it's ephemeral in nature. It doesn't last. It's here for some time. We enjoy the good karma, but again, eventually the good karma runs out. So therefore, even if we are a god, the good karma runs out and we fall back again within the cycle of reincarnation. Very good. And so realize that it is not by works that one gains the eternal. So again, this is the summation of this very long sentence that's here. And that is, let me just read the whole thing again, because it's a long sentence. I want to make sure people understand the flow of the sentence. Let a man devoted to spiritual life examine carefully the ephemeral nature of such enjoyment, whether here or hereafter, as may be won by good works. And in so doing, realize that it is not by good works or karmas that one gains the eternal. So, interesting. Again, it is not by good works, i.e. either materialistic, literally working in this world to build a massive bank account and get possessions, etc., but also, this verse is saying, it also is not merely by doing good karma, that is, by doing charity, by being nice to people, etc., by, again, just being a generally nice, good person. While this is something that should indeed be done, and let there be no confusion about this, we should indeed do good toward others. But all that this verse is trying to explain to us is this very important principle that even in doing material good, which you see even an atheist seemingly can do, that is not how we know the eternal. That is not how one gains the eternal. In other words, good works within the material context are precisely that, material, not spiritual. But rather, it is by transcending such material good works. It is by understanding that, indeed, everything in this nature is ephemeral except for my true self, my Atman, and except for God. It is by understanding this and having that wisdom of understanding the true versus the false, the eternal versus the temporal, that we gain the eternal. Now, here is this very interesting word, which is repeated again afterwards, the eternal. So thus, God here is explained as the eternal. Why is God described here as the eternal, as opposed to anything else? Well, this, of course, is to juxtapose precisely what was being said. The eternal versus the ephemeral, versus the transient, versus that which is extremely temporary, which we have for a very short period of time, but then, as if it was never even there, it's gone. It's gone. Like that banana split. like a million other examples that I or you or anyone can give, where at that moment you're enjoying something material, and at that moment it seems as if all time has stopped, and this is the most important activity that I could possibly be engaged in until it's over. And then where is it? It's as if it was never even there. It is as if it were simply a dream. Well, the reason why God here is described as the eternal is indeed to show that juxtaposition between the temporary, including the temporary pleasures of this world, when one is in illusion, versus what it is that the soul is actually yearning for. And that is indeed the eternal. That is indeed that supreme bliss, that supreme being, knowing whom our search for pleasures stops. Because we have now found that anandam, that bliss that does not go away, that bliss that is ever present, that is ever there, because that bliss itself is a manifestation of that being who is eternal, that is God. What in the West we call God, what in Sanatana Dharma we call Sriman Narayana, the Supreme Absolute. So this is why God is referred to as the eternal, and this indeed is what we are seeking. And it is only in taking refuge of and knowing and having devotion to the eternal that we can be happy. Now, what is the bridge that is there? Why is it, one could easily ask, that it is only by knowing the eternal that we can be happy? That is, by knowing God. The very simple answer to this is that it is because we are eternal, and thus we share in God's nature. It is our nature as Atman to be beings who really, inwardly, are accustomed to the eternal. That's why none of us wants to die. Even if you're an atheist, you don't want to die. You don't quite understand why, though, do you? It's because subconsciously, deep within, in those few moments that you're honest with yourself, you understand you're an eternal being, that you have always existed and that you always shall exist. That being the case, it is because of that connection between ourselves and God as eternal beings that, truthfully, we will never have happiness in embracing that which is opposite of our nature, which is temporary. We are eternal beings. By embracing the opposite of that which is temporary, not eternal, we can't be happy. It is indeed as eternal beings only when we know the eternal, the true eternal God, that we then have joy. So, this is half the verse so far. Let's continue. Let him, and now again, I'm going to stop there. Who is him? Just to remind you, the individual who is devoted to spiritual life. So again, not just anybody, but rather that individual who in a very sincere manner, with great humility, etc., is very serious about spiritual life. That is, that person truly wants to know himself. He wants to know truth. What is the nature of all this reality? And the answers to every question that I have of importance. What is the nature of God, etc.? This is who this is talking about. Let him, that person, give no thought to transient things. So again, in other words, this is the path now that's being described. The path is one in which we are detached from that which is opposite our nature. We being eternal beings. And truthfully, eternality is simply one of the attributes of Atman, but this is the one that's being spoken of here, so we will stick to this. So we as eternal beings, understanding the nature of transient things, we are to be detached from transient things. We are to be detached from the material world and the fleeting pleasures that the material world gives us. Now I need to repeat again and again, as I often do again and again, that does this mean that we are to become yogis, let's say the stereotypical sort of yogi who is like a statue, like stone, where we never enjoy anything in this material world, etc.? No, of course not. Again, that's the stereotype. Indeed, if you read Bhagavad Gita, Krishna indeed tells Arjuna, do not be like that. That's not what it means to be a yogi. No, we interestingly can enjoy the wonderful sattvic things that this world has to offer. We can enjoy the taste of food, the taste of water. We can enjoy the beauty around us, the beauty in other people. We can enjoy wonderful music, etc., 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 etc. But this is the thing. Number one, what we do enjoy should be sattvic, that is, it should be the nature of purity and goodness and health, number one. And number two, it has to be enjoyed within the proper context. That is, connecting such enjoyment to God, understanding that God is ultimately the source of all true enjoyment, and dedicating all such joy to God. So this is it. We can indeed enjoy this world in a spiritual way, but not in a materialistic way. This is all that this verse is saying. So now, let him give no thought to transient things, i.e., let him be detached, the yogi, detached from material things, but absorbed in meditation. Absorbed in meditation. This is really, one could say, the most important clause of this sentence, because again, I explained how this entire verse is talking about the path. What is the path? Well, this is the path. This is the sadhana heart of the path, is meditation. One must be what? Meditating? Interested in meditation? No. Look at the exact wording. Absorbed in meditation. In other words, meditation has to be something that is at the very heart of your practice and something that you do with tremendous dedication. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean merely quantity-wise. In other words, is there a certain number of hours by which, now we can say that we are absorbed in meditation? It has to be 5 hours? Well, about 6. Or could it be as little as 4? No, it's not merely a matter of quantity. But when one meditates, one must meditate in such a way that you have, again, such devotion, such sincerity, that you are meditating qualitatively so well that you are bathing yourself in the very presence of God. So again, absorbed in meditation, and now, let him renounce the world. Let him renounce the world. So, very powerful last little clause here. Really, it's almost a sentence in itself, grammatically, let him renounce the world. But again, this is a sentence or a clause, however you want to see it, that again, one can very easily misinterpret and misunderstand. This verse is not saying that anyone who is sincere about spirituality must become a sannyasi, for example. You see, some foolish individuals who, possibly are sannyasis or pretending to be, may try to say that, this is the case. Everyone must become a renunciate. Well, number one, if you look at the history of Vedic culture, that is not the case. Vedic culture is a successful culture that consists of a wide variety of individuals, all of whom have their place in society doing different things, but all of whom have their eyes, have their awareness focused on God. It's not necessary for one to quite literally become a sannyasi, that is, a full, quote-unquote, renunciant, in order to know God. Again, if you don't understand this, read a wonderful scripture known as Bhagavad Gita, because this is the entire thesis of the Bhagavad Gita, that no, it's not necessary to become a renounced sannyasi, especially in external form alone, in order to know God. But rather, what is this clause actually saying by let him renounce the world? Let worldly activities, let worldly pursuits, let worldly concerns be on the back burner, and let them not be on the forefront of your awareness and of what you desire in your life. In other words, have your priorities straight. That's all that this is saying. Again, even the yogi has to eat. Even the yogi has to have shelter, etc., etc., etc. You can look at all the greatest gurus, especially of the 20th century, and they had all of the things that they needed to be successful in life. They flew in planes, they drove in cars, etc., etc. So you can indeed engage in the world, have all the things that you need in this world, as I was saying a little while ago. You can even enjoy the sattvic pleasures of this world, but understanding what is the priority. And that is that this world, this material world, is not primary. It is not our primary concern. Rather, it's on the back burner. We use all things as we need to with detachment in order to gain a higher footing in our life, both materially but especially spiritually. But our primary concern is indeed in knowing God. So thus, even when we are doing quote-unquote material things, when we're cooking, when we're driving, when we're cleaning, when we're doing anything, God is on the forefront of our awareness at all times. So this is what is really meant by renouncing the world. Again, not that every human being... Can you imagine? On the one hand, it sounds very pleasant if... How many people are in the world now? 7, 8 billion? If every single one of these individuals, ourselves included, decided to become a sannyasi right now, renounce everything. That would be a paradise, probably for about a month, until everything started to fall apart around us. And no food was being brought into the cities, and on and on and on. No, everyone has their place. It's not necessary for everyone to become a sannyasi, but at the same time, imagine this real scenario. Imagine a scenario in which everyone had their specific employment, their specific station in life, whatever they were doing, married, unmarried, business person, warrior, priest, laborer, etc. But to the best of their individual ability, every person in society was at least endeavoring to know God. That would be a real paradise. And that would be a paradise in which civilization would not fall apart. Now, let's go on a little bit more. If he, and again, who is he? Hopefully you. The sincere individual, the person who's not trying to play games, the person for whom, oh, this is just some interesting thing because I'm taking a pause from playing a video game right now. No. The individual for whom spirituality is something truly of importance to them. If that person, hopefully you, would know the eternal, let him humbly approach a guru. Let's stop there. Humbly. So first of all, if that individual is indeed to know God. So it's interesting how the language of the Vedic scriptures, for the most part, and this is what's wonderful about the Vedic scriptures, it's unambiguous. It's unambiguous. It's not, well, it would be kind of okay if blah, blah, blah. No. These things are stated emphatically. If you want to know God, if you really want to know God, then let that person, that sincere person, humbly approach. And now, this word humbly, this is a word that I want to hover on a little bit, hover over and just talk about this a little bit. Because indeed, this is one of these words that you hear in the Vedic scriptures again and again. It is a principle that in all, let's say, legitimate spiritual pursuits, even regardless of what the specific path is, you even find this in, let's say, mystic Christianity, in Taoism, in Buddhism, etc. This concept of humility. In all traditional, i.e. authentic spirituality, humility is a characteristic, is a behavior that is understood to be crucial if you want to practice spirituality. Now, juxtapose this with, again, modern, commercialized, New Age spirituality, where, trust me, you can listen to New Age speaker after New Age speaker after New Age speaker ad nauseum, and it would make you nauseous to listen to too much of that dribble. But imagine, you can listen to such people for thousands of hours. You won't hear the word humility. Rather, you'll hear the opposite. I love me. I love myself. What I want should become manifest. I want a perfect relationship with my perfect partner who I'm going to sculpt my perfect partner in my mind to fit my needs and my desires, my purposes, etc., etc. In other words, the opposite of humility. It's radical self-centeredness in New Age spirituality and truthfully much of modern spirituality. But yet again, when we look at real spirituality, authentic, traditional spirituality, you have this concept of humility. That is, of understanding our place in the universe and understanding with humility that if I have even come to the point where I even have the ability, I even have the chance to practice anything authentically spiritual, that is due to the grace of God alone, not my own greatness. Indeed, I have zero greatness, but it is due to the greatness of God and God's grace upon me that I have the ability to even pursue spiritual life. I'm pursuing spiritual life not because I'm so smart, not because I'm so good, not because I'm so and any positive thing I want to say about myself. We want to be honest in our assessment of ourselves. We want to have confidence and some healthy self-pride. But at the same time, we have to understand also that it is due to the grace of God that I even am on the spiritual path to begin with, and be grateful for that. So, going back to this, if he would know the eternal, let him humbly approach a guru. Now let's stop there. This is indeed also part of the path. Once one has shown their sincerity, and they are, again, devoted to spiritual life, and they have that humility that is important, that is one of the foundations for even approaching a guru, then we have to approach a guide for assistance. If we want to learn anything of any value in this world, we go to an expert. See, this is why you watch the news, because you think there are experts who are there. Those are fake experts, for the most part, especially mainstream media. But truthfully, if you want to learn really anything real, you want to become a doctor, and I've given a million examples. You want to learn martial arts, etc. What is the best way? You go to someone who is an expert in that field and who has lived it. So thus, you approach a guru, but not just any guru. Now it gives the qualifications of what makes for an authentic guru. So you approach a guru, devoted, who is devoted to Brahman, in other words, who is devoted to God. And in fact, let's stop there for a moment. Again, the wording here is very, very important. Not merely who knows Brahman, certainly not who is Brahman, who is God, but who is devoted to God. So in other words, one must approach a Vaishnava guru, one who has bhakti, one who has devotion toward God, and who understands that devotion toward God is the ultimate attainment. So a guru who is devoted to Brahman and who is well versed in the scriptures. So interesting, bhakti and Vedanta. Bhakti and Vedanta. So thus, a true guru is one who has bhakti, that is, they are devoted to God, they have devotion toward the Absolute, toward Bhagavan Sriman Narayana, Bhagavan Sri Krishna, and they also are philosophically inclined, i.e., they are well versed in the Vedic scriptures. They can speak, and they can speak with authority. They don't make things up. They don't say, oh, I channeled such and such entity who revealed this to me. No, don't go to a so-called guru who's a channeler. Rather, go to a guru who has devotion and who, again, is well versed in the scriptures. An individual who understands the scriptures inside and out, who understands the purport of the scriptures, who not just has scriptures memorized. You see, I've actually met individuals who, in a very showy kind of way, I'll be having a nice spiritual conversation with them, and then I can see a twinkle in their eye as they try to impress me, and they'll recite something in Sanskrit very quickly, and then just kind of look at me, waiting for me to be impressed. No, not merely that they have some sort of verses memorized, but that they, within their hearts, understand the very purport of the scriptures, and naturally so. That's a guru, someone who can speak about the scriptures effortlessly. So, this is the path. This is the path, what this entire verse has been speaking of here in the Mundaka Upanishad. So, indeed, if one is serious about spiritual life, and I'm speaking to you, I'm speaking to all the individuals who are there in my audience, many of whom I know individually. I know who you are, I know your names, I've spoken with you individually, privately, etc. I know many of you are sincere. For those who I haven't spoken to one-on-one and I don't quite know who you are, hopefully you are sincere and serious about spiritual life. This verse is explaining to you the path. The path, without mystery. Without mystery, without leaving it in an ambiguous sort of way. No, this is what the path is. You want to practice the path toward knowing the eternal? This is indeed what we do. Exactly what is described here. And of course, this is not the only verse that describes the path, but this is a good one. This is a very nice one that gives a very good summary of what it means to be an individual who is on the path to knowing the eternal. So with that, I thank you for listening to my discourse. And I will stop here. And with that, I want to see if there are any questions. We have a nice amount of time, approximately 19 minutes or so, according to my clock. So again, if there are any questions about either anything that we discussed today or any aspect of the philosophy or practice of Sanatana Dharma, please feel free to ask. Very good, Siddharth, very good. I'm glad that you heard what I said last time, and you're the first person to ask this question, so I will indeed answer this question. And the question is, Acharyaji, can you please explain why India is still suffering from a wrong understanding of ahimsa? Is Gandhi really responsible? Also, why do we not have many Brahmins or Kshatriyas in society? This is indeed an important question. It's a question that I myself have contemplated and spoken about for decades, actually, including with many. I've had discussions about this topic with many important gurus, even with politicians, pretty high up politicians in India for decades, actually. And it is important to address this because, indeed, while I always make this distinction that Sanatana Dharma is not India and India is not Sanatana Dharma, they're not the same thing. At the same time, we always have to acknowledge our indebtedness to Bharat, to use the proper term, what is called India in the West, because of the fact that, indeed, there are more followers of Sanatana Dharma in India than any nation on earth. There are more temples, etc., and we will be eternally grateful for the fact that it was indeed the Indians who preserved this knowledge untouched for thousands of years, and for that alone we are indebted to India. So this is why I'm going to address this. So first of all, why is India still suffering from wrong understanding of ahimsa? Is Gandhi really responsible? He is certainly one of the main people responsible. He's not the only, let's say, individual or phenomenon that is responsible for this misunderstanding. Really, the misunderstanding started a little bit before him. It started, sadly, with Jainism. Jainism originally being a part of Sanatana Dharma, of the actual Vedic tradition, but then eventually splitting away several centuries before Christ, several centuries BC. After Mahavira, but we have to blame Jainism a little bit for its fanatical interpretation of ahimsa. And I should explain for those people who don't even know what the word ahimsa means. It means nonviolence. This is what the term actually means, which is indeed a very important concept in Sanatana Dharma, in yoga. It is one of the yamas and niyamas of the yoga system. And while the concept of nonviolence was understood in its proper form, that is, that yes, we try to avoid violence for spiritual purposes, but we also believe very much in self-defense. So thus, as I've always said, Sanatana Dharma is actually a warrior tradition, but it's a civilized warrior tradition, a spiritual warrior tradition. Ahimsa has always been very important. Sadly, in modernity, the concept of ahimsa that most people have is the wrong concept. It's a warped idea. That is the idea of pacifism. And indeed, while there were antecedents to Gandhi who were responsible for this, Gandhi was the main person, sadly. Gandhi was a powerful individual. He was someone who, he was celibate. He was someone who he was quite spiritual in his own way. He was not really an orthodox or a traditionalist or authentic Vedic practitioner in any way, shape, or form. Indeed, if he were alive, he would agree with that, actually. But at the same time, he was someone who was quite influential. He led the nonviolent independence movement, or at least he was one of the leaders of the independence movement of India. And for him, he was indeed a radical pacifist. He was someone who, as you know, he allowed his followers to be beaten by the British, etc., and he didn't believe in any sort of violent resistance toward colonialism, etc. So the truth of the matter is, a lot of it can indeed be placed at the feet of Gandhi. But again, the proper understanding of ahimsa is that it is a spiritual principle. If an individual especially wants to be a spiritual practitioner, yes, you try to exercise nonviolence in your thoughts, in your words, in your actions. But at the same time, it is not pacifism. It is not the idea that, if you are being persecuted or attacked by evil forces, you just lie back and do nothing. That is not a concept that has ever been found anywhere in the Vedic scriptures. On the contrary, you have so many verses that say the opposite. You have so many examples of warriors who say the opposite. If you, as an innocent person, are attacked, or if you see someone else who is an innocent person who is harmed or physically attacked, you defend yourself, you defend your people, you defend your nation, you defend the innocent by any means that is necessary. That is Sanatana Dharma. You defend the innocent. So that's the first part. Second part to your question, also, why do we not have many Brahmanas or Kshatriyas in the society? Several reasons, actually. First of all, because of the fact that Islamic invaders who invaded India for hundreds and hundreds of years, beginning roughly 8th century AD, something like that, annihilated the leadership of the Hindu community, of the Vedic community. They annihilated the Brahmanas. They defeated the Kshatriyas, the warriors, and they annihilated not all, but many of them, etc. That's the first thing, is actual genocide, actual physical annihilation of the leaders of Vedic society that was done at the hands of Abrahamists. The other problem is that, indeed, when you ask why is it that there are not many Brahmanas or Kshatriyas in the society, of course, this applies, interestingly, not only to India. You see, a person can ask the same question about every nation today. Where are the Brahmanas? Where are the Kshatriyas of America? Now, for those who don't know that terminology, a Brahmana is a sagely person, a saintly individual. An individual who is not just a religious leader, but an individual who is personifying what it means to be close to God. Where do we find such individuals today who are spiritual teachers who teach by example? And then where are the Kshatriyas? Where are those individuals who are true warriors, who are honorable warriors? That is, they stand up for truth. They do not compromise in their search for justice, etc. Where are the incorruptible politicians? Where are the true leaders of society? See, this is a question that, again, you can ask not only of India, but of pretty much any nation in the world today. And what is the answer to this? It's not an easy answer. It's an answer which, to understand, we need to understand from the historical context how we have been purposefully deprived of such spiritual and martial leaders over a course of hundreds of years. It's been done purposefully. It's been done with the same idea as the same Islamic invaders who originally invaded India and literally murdered all of the priests, killed many of the Kshatriyas, of the warriors in battle. In modernity, meaning the last roughly 300 years, what we've seen has been there has been a systematic attempt, indeed, on the part of many evil people to deprive us of our leadership. As a result, when we look around us, we're disappointed. We're disappointed in people who call themselves religious leaders, but who are spineless, who do not stand for truth. We look around us and we see political leaders, heads of state, so-called presidents, really residents, who are cowards and corrupt. And the people see this. We see that we are indeed leaderless. And indeed, the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas are the leaders of society. So this is where we find ourselves today. Again, to go very in-depth into the last 300 years and how systematically we've been deprived of these leaders would take way too long. Maybe I'll take an hour one day and I'll talk about that, but not today. This is the important thing, is that yes, Siddharth, you recognize this, and so do many others, that we are indeed leaderless. Where are the Brahmanas? Where are the Kshatriyas of today? That is the question. And this is the answer. They have to arise from among the people. Now, while that might sound like a nice, pithy little democratic like a democratic populism on my part, this is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, indeed, we need to revive such leaders. Those leaders are among us today. They themselves may or may not know it, but we need to either make ourselves such leaders if we have that calling, but then when we find such leaders, both in the spiritual and martial and political fields, we need to rally around that person and help them with every resource that we have. We are to rally to the saffron flag of the true sadhu. We are to rally to the flag of the true king and support that person with every ounce of energy that we have within us. And in this way, we will have such leaders again. So I hope that answers your question. Very good. And that was just the first question. We have more. And hopefully I'll have time to answer more. Here's a good question. I'm going to answer this, actually. This is from Lothar Grimm. Namaste, Sri Acharyaji. If one has Weltschmerz, ennui, is indifferent to pleasure in existence and just wants out, is suicide acceptable? Please also discuss Paralpavesha. By the way, I am from Park Slope. Very nice. All right, yes, I will definitely answer this. No, it is not acceptable to commit suicide simply because one has ennui, simply because one has a distaste for this world, or one feels just kind of cold to the world, or for that matter is even just depressed or something like this. No, that's not a good reason to commit suicide. Many people do, and really the truth of the matter is, even with that, what really forces a person to commit suicide is in fact not merely just depression or ennui or anything like that. It's something deeper than that. It's actually pain that forces a person to commit suicide. Pain, and sometimes coupled with hopelessness. But no, simply feeling a dissatisfaction with the world, no, that's not a reason to commit suicide. And then you ask about something quite technical, paralpavesha. This is a very technical term. It's a Sanskrit term, and this also is something that very sadly is quite misunderstood by many modern people, as is the case with probably every Vedic concept, unfortunately. Most Vedic concepts today are misunderstood. And what this term means is basically a practice in which a very advanced yogi chooses the time of their leaving this world and of attaining liberation. So thus, when they are ready to leave this world, rather than simply dying of natural causes, they will make the very conscious decision that in full peace, see, this is what's important. They're not depressed. They're not experiencing hopelessness. No, on the contrary. They are in full peace, and they decide at this point to go into deep meditation and to essentially fast until they leave their body, to fast to death. Several things to be said. A, this is not suicide, because the prerequisites for suicide versus prayopavesha are something that are very different. The foundations are not the same. Again, the individual yogi who chooses to leave the world is not experiencing depression, hopelessness, a type of ennui, etc., existential angst, or anything like this. On the contrary, they are at peace. They're in joy. They are someone who they've lived a full life, and they simply feel, and it is their decision to do so, they feel that, all right, now is the time to leave this body. I know I'm not the body, and I know that I'm the eternal soul. Now it's time for me to purposefully leave this body and to go to liberation. And indeed to do so in a very dignified way, in meditation, by fasting, and eventually simply coming to the point where in complete peace I simply transcend the material body, not to come back. So parayopavesha is something that is, again, very different from suicide. Very good. So I hope that answers the question. Very good. And with that, if you give me a moment, I'm just looking at a few more questions here. So please just give me a moment, because I've looked at the clock and we don't have a lot of time. Sadly, I need to end on time today, so I want to pick a question that I can answer in a very short sort of way, but I know is also a good question. Actually, this is not a question, but let me read the statement because it's actually quite important. This is from William Seaborn, and he says, "Let's all pray for our Dharmi brothers and sisters in Bangladesh. Many dharmic homes and temples are being destroyed now all around Bangladesh." That's quite true, actually. That's something that is very, very true. People may not be aware of this because, of course, such things tend to not hit the mainstream news in any way. But this is something that is indeed quite important. And that is that, as of right now, Hindu temples are being destroyed in Bangladesh. Islamic fanatics, very sadly, mobs and mobs of them, are attacking Hindu temples. Indeed, they attacked an ISKCON temple, burnt it to the ground, killed, murdered one devotee, at least one other, and probably more at this point. At least one other was in critical condition, etc. So indeed, let us pray for the followers of Dharma, of Sanatana Dharma in Bangladesh. And again, please give me a moment, because we only have 2 minutes and I kind of do need to end on time today, so I'm looking for a question that I can answer somewhat quickly. Here's a simple one that I can answer pretty quickly, actually. This is from Rupesh, and the question is, Namaste Acharyaji. Thank you for your wonderful satsang. My absolute pleasure. Can you please explain the significance of ringing the bell before we start our puja? Thank you very much. Very good. And by the bell, I assume that you mean the bell that is rung as an individual is doing puja. Yes, several things actually. First of all, it is indeed to signal that we are doing puja, and very specifically to signal to God, to get God's attention that indeed we are now in the midst of doing puja. So that's the primary purpose. Secondarily, from a sonic perspective, interestingly, the sound of the bell as it is being rung and we're doing puja is said to replicate the sound that one hears when the devas, when the gods are in our presence, when they are close to us. So that's another very important reason for why we ring the bell. Very good. All right, so with that, we have 1 minute. And again, as I said, I do need to end on time, so I'm going to stop here for now. And I want to thank you again all for being here with us. And again, let me just mention that when you have a chance, please visit our main website, which is dharmacentral.com. When you're there, please take a look at all of our books that are available. Please buy them all. We have approximately 10 books that are available, and they're all books that are designed to explain Sanatana Dharma in a way that is extremely authentic. And when you're there, also, please feel free to join our email list, as well as look at our all of the various resources that we have available there. And with that, I thank you all again for being here with me. Namaste. Jaya Shriman Narayana. Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna. Jaya Shri Guru. Sanatana Dharma Jayate. Dharma Rashtra Jayate. Om Harihi Om. And with that, everyone, until the next time we get together, please take very good care of yourselves in every way.